Welcome to the 11 o'clock or 11:04 Ask the Pharma Voice 100 Roundtable. I'm Taryn Grom, co-founder and editor-in-chief of PharmaVOICE. Thank you for spending your valuable time with us today. And a sincere thanks to all of our sponsors who made this day possible. This year's theme is all about sparking innovation, igniting change, and blazing new trails. Take a look at how some of our 2021 honorees are doing just that.
I'm igniting change by paying it forward.
I hope to blaze new trails by creating the next generation of medicines with patients, not simply for patients.
Igniting change through addressing the barriers between patients and their medicines.
I'm blazing new trails by exciting people for innovative science.
At Medical Leverage, we're blazing new trails by wiping the old way of business off the board, rethinking how to grow and sustain our business in the new world of medical education.
Sparking innovation is about trying new things, pushing yourself, pushing the organization. We also have people's lives on our hands. We have regulations to think about. I think it's why I like aviation so much. We have to try those new things carefully, methodically, scientifically. That's how we get value to patients who are waiting for better therapies.
I'm igniting change through the cognitive neuroscience of video game design.
I'm blazing new trails by helping to build a culture of smart speed for our gene therapy company. Speed is everything when you're dealing with one and done therapies, but you have to be smart about the risks you decide to take, and you have to do it together as a company.
I am igniting change by embracing change as a constant force and an opportunity for growth, to move things from how they are today to how they can be tomorrow. Change starts with listening, both to what is being said and to what is not being said, and by recognizing that small changes can be just as valuable as large ones.
There's a gender gap in medicine and it's harming women. Medical research traditionally focuses on men, but women aren't small men. It's time to end the gender divide and focus on women's health and therapies as a unique category.
I am sparking innovation by giving a forum for employees to share their ideas, recognize employees for their incredible ideas in many different ways, both publicly and privately, and giving employees time to think. The entire organization does not have meetings on Wednesday afternoons, allowing them to think big and not just about the day-to-day grind. And finally, all 1,300 of us are focused on the same criteria for success, which opens up autonomy to solve for issues creating barriers to success.
Sparking, igniting, and blazing. Before we dive into the questions from our audience, and please do send us your questions, I want to invite you to view our panelist bios by clicking on the panelist headshot in the speaker section below. Now to the show. Welcome 2019 PharmaVOICE 100 Amy Bybee, VP Healthcare at Epsilon. She is igniting change by being curious, compassionate, and courageous. Sam Glatzenberg, founder and CEO of Level X, a 2021 PharmaVOICE 100, as you just heard on the video, is igniting change by advancing neuroscience of gaming design. And Mary Ann Risk, PhD, Chief Strategy Officer at Medable, a 2021 PharmaVOICE 100 honoree. She is blazing new trails to encourage creativity. And Wendy White, co-founder of Rarity, a PharmaVOICE 100 Red Jacket honoree, is igniting change by first understanding the problem that needs to be solved, then truly listening to all stakeholders, and finally collaborating around a well-articulated common purpose. We're sorry that Steve Hamburg couldn't join us today, but we're so glad to have all of you with us. So as I said, audience, please send your questions in for this amazing panel. And we have one right away. So to kick us off, all of you have expertise in digital and technology in different areas. So from your perspective, where do you see the digital technology revolution transformation taking us? Amy, let's start with you.
Good morning. Thank you, Taryn. And Pleasure to be here, and congratulations on another fabulous PharmaVOICE 100. Such a cool event, and you should be very proud, you and your staff and team. So, and hello, panelists. I look forward to the discussion today. So, I love the conversation in the video that you showed earlier, Taryn, because for me and what I do within marketing technology, that's so true, is that change is the only constant in marketing. And I start with that very intentionally because everything we do is really driven through that in terms of how we're managing through change, how we're guiding our clients and customers through change to ultimately create those better patient experiences. So from a marketing technology perspective, we're seeing the digital transformation taking place, and different organizations are really either in the crawl, walk, or run stage. So it's really different based upon their maturity within that overall transformation. Couple 3 points, and then I'll hand it off to the next panelist. But for us, we're seeing the impact of privacy and regulations that will continue to, I think, inform our decisions and how we move forward with technology. I would say there's also more of the expectation with the patient consumer that he or she or they need a different experience within our healthcare sector, and they expect that because they're consumers first. And lastly, I would say it's really looking at how we're managing our data better. And I say that from the implications of first-party data management, especially with the impact of again, the third-party cookie deprecation and things along those lines. So that's kind of where we're seeing it, and in our opportunities, we see it to help our clients.
Thanks, Amy. And we'll get into it a little bit later too about that crawl, walk, run stage, because with all organizations at different stages in their evolution, this can be a challenge as we go forward. Marianne, I'm going to turn to you, and congratulations on your new role.
Thank you. And congratulations to the panelists. It's really an honor and privilege to be amongst leaders that are really at the tip of the sphere, that really need to modernize the way we're doing medicine, right, in life sciences. And it's just been a profound evolution that many of us have been catapulted during the COVID times, especially, where there's been an important area of forging new relationships and collaborations and connections. So thank you to all those that are blazing trails with us. One of the things that I think is really important, and one of the reasons why I joined Medable and the continuous passion to ignite innovation, is that really it's about creating a culture of transformation where you're collaborating and reducing bureaucracy, creating airspace to have more informed decision-making around the patient. And when we think about some of the things that we are all sharing in a mission, is we want to make sure there's better access to patients remotely anywhere they are. We want to make sure there's improved diversity. We want to make sure that we're not only improving on our operational excellence for speed and quality, but is it giving the right value for patients? And, if COVID taught us anything, it's about being able to have a broader spectrum to engage with leaders globally on the mission to transform and change research. So I'm very incredibly excited to be with Medable and continue that vertical of changing the way we think about how technology can radically improve incremental and even exponential ways of reaching our patients.
Excellent, Marianne. And this is not your first go around in creating that culture of transformation. So I look forward to see where you take Medable. Wendy, I'm going to turn to you next. You have been at the forefront of digital for a long time, not to, age you in the industry, but you are one of those trailblazers. So talk to us about your thoughts.
Well, thanks, Taryn. And by the way, thanks for pointing that out. I just realized I'm going to have to update my photo, my bio. but yeah, so for me, it's like thinking about the digital transformation and how, and I love, Marianne, what you were saying, and Amy, what you were saying, and especially around the diversity of thought and what digital transformation means. For me, coming out of the rare disease space, the biggest impact has been the ability for patients, citizen scientists, to connect with each other, and for us as pharma people in biopharma and service to think about how do we collect that data, and how do we look at how people interact together to solve the desperately needed challenges. I'm all around the purpose. So if we think about what COVID has also shown us, which is that in that case where there's where people were dying, where there was no obvious path forward, and we had this opportunity to collect data and to make hypotheses even ahead of doing clinical trials. That's the same kind of situation we have in rare disease. So that combination of innovation that's really driven by purpose and by need, and so appropriately used to get that diversity of thought and to all work towards a common goal that where you can really change things and make a difference. I think that's what matters to me and where I think we're going, I hope.
I love that, innovation driven by purpose, and I particularly liked your notation of citizen scientists, because we've all become so engaged in our own healthcare.
Yep.
Excellent point. Sam, I'm going to turn it to you now, and you have a really interesting story to tell in terms of technology.
Right. Well, yeah, I love questions that are like, you predict the future of technology, and in this case, we're going to sort of talk about it right in the context of HCP marketing and education. So if you click the bio, I mean, I spent my career in the video games industry. So, part of my job, for example, back, years ago when I was at Microsoft, was to do this, right? Predict and plan, predict the next decade of technological advancements to determine how we take advantage of these things to make video games look better, right? Because I come from video games. So how do we go from characters that look computer generated at the turn of the millennium to characters that basically look real? So today I can buy a video game, for $50 and zoom into the eye of one of the characters, and you can't tell the difference between this and reality. When it comes to leveraging technology, though, there is a huge gap, right, between what is going on in entertainment and what we're doing in HCP marketing and education. Decades behind the interactive entertainment industry. And the example I'll use is an eye, right? So this is what an eye looks like in a video game. This is what an eye looks like in a $250,000 ophthalmology trainer. Looks like it fell out of a gumball machine, or that the veins were scribbled on in crayon by my 3-year-old. There's literally decades of gap between what we're doing in the video games industry from both a technology and a neuroscience perspective, the neuroscience of game design, and what we see in HCP education. Luckily, there are companies, like Level X, we're closing that gap. And since we have a reference point in other industries, predicting what the future looks like is actually much easier. So what we're able to do on the pharma side is technology is going to basically move us beyond a world where we struggle to educate HCPs passively, right? The way we do it today, banner ads and videos and presentations and webinars, stuff that we kind of pass in front of distracted doctors in the hope that they'll retain some of it. Technology is going to transform HCP marketing the same way it transformed games, right? It's going to allow us to create interactive experiences that challenge the doctor, right? That balance reward and frustration, challenge and skill to trigger neurochemical releases in the brain that form and reinforce new neural connections and fundamentally change behavior, change diagnostic behavior, treatment behavior, how we manage patients over time. And technology is going to actually allow doctors to play with the subject matter, developing mental models for complex systems like rare disease diagnosis or complex mechanism of action. And in some cases, they'll actually be able to do it collaboratively with other HCPs or with sales reps and MSL. So it's an exciting future, and we're just sort of scratching the surface of it today.
Well, Sam, thank you so much for that. It was an entertaining few minutes there. What you're doing is really very cutting edge. So thank you so much for that quick demo. I think that was really helpful to understand where your organization is taking technology. And I want to welcome Steve to the panel. Thank you so much. I'm glad you were able to join us. And for our audience, I just want to introduce Steve. He is the managing partner and chief creative officer at Calcium. He's a 2016 and 2010 PharmaVOICE 100, and he is igniting change by going deeper into how our audiences think, feel, and behave. Steve, we were just talking about how technology is leading us in different directions. And I'd like to get, cold off the set. Here you go. Where are you seeing technology taking us? Specifically because you work in an advertising agency environment. So what are you seeing?
Sure. Thanks, Taryn. And just a word about technology in my house. It's clearly not state of the art because we had a power failure and, of course, a Wi-Fi failure. So apologize for joining you late. Nice to see you all. Yeah, technology, big data was the thing 5 or 10 years ago. AI, machine learning are more au courant. A thing called deep learning is becoming much more interesting. I think where things are going, I view things from sort of through the lens of human behavior and also human biology. I think technology is going to empower our ability to really understand the specificities of each human being biologically. And then also behaviorally, I think we're going to be able to map genomes even more completely than ever, and that will have an impact on how diseases are treated. But I think we're also going to gain a much deeper, much more profound understanding of how people behave and why they behave. So on the behavioral level, I think deep learning, AI will enable us to model and therefore better understand what drives motivation. And emotions are typically hard things to quantify and predict. Sort of storm forecasting or stock market forecasting are, I think, great exemplars of how truly complex systems can be difficult to comprehend and certainly predict. But I see a place where technology is going to illuminate to a much greater degree how people behave, what they want, what they seek, and go way beyond what they tell you. And we're already seeing that in algorithms in social media sites where they anticipate your needs and wants. Eventually, I think we're going to be able to customize messages to an unprecedented degree. We're going to be able to talk to people about what they specifically want to talk about, as opposed to broadcasting, which is an approximation of what a great number of people want to talk about. So I'm very excited about this quantum leap in our ability to deeply understand human beings.
Those are great insights. And, certainly technology knows how I am because Amazon's at my door before I even know I needed it. But aside from that, but predicting that, the behaviors of people is very tricky. And when we start to dig into it, it really relates back to what Amy said early on. It's about privacy. How are we going to manage all this technology, yet keep our privacy safe? If indeed our privacy, under the assumption that it is safe right now, right? So I think that's a question that really needs to be explored. And how does that happen equitably across the ecosystem? Any thoughts on that from you all? Where are we going to go in terms of privacy? Amy, you kicked us off with that. So
yeah, sure. I mean, to me, it comes down to consent, right? I mean, it's putting the power of the consent within the consumer or within the patient, so they really control what data and information they want to share. And there's full transparency about what we're doing with their data, why we're collecting the data, the data won't be shared, and how we're really using it to help benefit their journey or benefit the path to wellness, if you will. So I think it has to come at it with transparency, and I think it has to come at it with the patients and consumers understanding and giving them the control to consent, but then using that data in a way that is beneficial to them. It, to me, is the key. It's transparency and again, consent at the patient level.
You know what, Amy, can I just say though, there's one other thing to think about. At least this is what happens for us is the problem is you can have consent, but sometimes you could consent for things that you don't even know. Like people could consent because they're so desperate. For example, let me give you an example, which is you can, there's a company or there's a technology out there where you can take a kind of a medical selfie of somebody. In the rare disease space, 65% of rare diseases have facial dysmorphia. So you could actually look at somebody's photo and you could figure out if they have a particular disease. Well, you think, oh, that's great. But actually giving up your photo or your children's photo, you have no idea how much information is embedded in that or what that's going to be used for in 15 years. Sure. So you could sort of do that right away. So it's really an interesting thing. I would add on to what you're saying in terms of consent to education, but also to thinking about that patients, right now we also have an issue with patients don't own their own data. The data is all owned by physicians or hospitals. And so I think at the end of the day that there has to be a bigger, broader understanding that patients should own their own data and be able to think about how much they want to share and at what level they want to share it.
Yep.
Yeah, and
I'd love to add on that. I was going to say, Marianne, you're deep into the DCT realm, so talk to us about where you're seeing this going.
Yeah, I get so fired up when I hear about some of these, I would say, modernization challenges that we need to think about as leaders. So Medable, a decentralized platform organization, one of the things that we think about is when we look at our e-consent solution, right? We really need to think about not only optimizing the time frame and being able to reduce the traditional cost of paper, but what is that new convenience at the consumer grade, where we're now providing patients convenience and choice, and that information that's bidirectional. There was a case study where we were working towards establishing key notifications for patients on what and how they want to be engaged, but also understanding the process. When you think about the whole patient recruitment and retention, it really was the patient properly consented and informed? Do they really understand what was going to happen in those multiple visits? And to the point that mentioned earlier, right? Not only do patients need to understand what they're signing up for, but what is that engagement process? And I think with the modernization of having, an elegant UI that is integrated to the way they want to be informed about their health. And we're going to see, I think, even touching on Steve's point around the, big data used to be the case. And back in my day with Oracle, we're going to be looking at the holistic view of the patient. We're going to be, guys, we're collecting data, before, during, and after the trial. So even before we anticipate that we're targeting a particular patient to think that the treatment we're going to give them is going to give them adequate results, we want to make sure that they are fully engaged to know that we're on a path and a journey around their evolution to improve that quality of care and quality of health. And so never has there been a time where technology is not only capturing data earlier and often around the patient, but now they become part of the clinical trial by design process. And I think that's what's so exciting about the collaboration that we're seeing already, is that we are working not just handed in the tech world, just handed a protocol saying, build me my study, right? It's actually, how should we better design that clinical trial to get the most optimal results so that patients are well informed? They want to be able to not only choose to share their data, but also understand the proliferation of that information, how it's going to be used, and maybe we invite them to another study. So anyway, couldn't be more excited about the stuff that we're all doing together to tackle new challenges, new problem, and provide solutions for the benefits of patients.
Yeah, just one point on the subject of consent, which is an important one. I think consent is very fungible, and there is overt consent, and then there's what I call stealth consent, which is a lot softer than overt consent. And basically, anytime you travel through the internet, you encounter all sorts of stealth consent moments relative to cookies and so on. And even without those things, your behavior is being quantified and tracked, and therefore data about your behavior is being accumulated. And so that's not the same kind of consent as we're talking about, which is almost sort of legalistic. Right. But I guess the fungibility of it and maybe the stealth nature of some of it is worrisome in terms of privacy, but also certainly opens up a lot of positive potential in terms of understanding who we're trying to communicate with.
Excellent. So we have 1 minute left. And so, Sam, I'm going to ask you a question. You're going to have to wrap it up in 1 minute. And it's just like I had to, we're addressing the whole tech revolution in 25 minutes. Can you quickly elaborate how your team is using gaming in the neuroscience space? You're on the clock, my friend.
Oh, sure. Well, I think so.
No pressure.
I think the question is more around, I think it's more around sort of how we're using neuroscience to do what we're doing. Right. Okay. So because basically what we're doing is we're using basically the neuroscience of games right? The same tools that are being used in the consumer space to engage audiences for hundreds of hours and change their behavior. And we're basically utilizing this to train doctors. Whether it's using puzzle game mechanics to train rare disease diagnosis, or strategy game mechanics to train longitudinal patient management, or puzzle mechanics to help doctors develop a mental model for things like mechanism of action or mechanism of disease. On the flip side, we're actually using all of this in neurology and neuroscience as well to, train HCPs on these concepts in their discipline.
We could talk for another hour with you all. This has been a really exciting and, future thinking conversation. So thank you all. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Marianne. An amazing roundtable. And I also want to thank our sponsors, Synovian Pharmaceuticals, Calcium, Encedo, Ogilvy Health, Parexel, Syneos Health, Umotive, Health Union, Medtrix Healthcare, Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, eMIDS, Lovelane, and North Highland. We have a 30-minute break before our Sparks of Inspiration panel that starts at noon. Feel free to view the PharmaVoice 100 videos, chat with an attendee, visit an exhibitor, grab a cup of coffee or some lunch, and we'll be back here at noon. Thank you so much, and thanks to our audience for being so engaged. Thank you all.
Wonderful.
Thank you,